Hey folks, this is Yugandhar Surya here. Today we are diving into React.js, a super powerful and fun tool to build web applications. So let's jump right in and get started with React.js. Have you ever wondered how popular websites like Facebook, Netflix, GeoCinema, Prime, WhatsApp, Flipkart, Instagram even, and much more websites like that you used on daily basis, even ChatGPT that you use on daily basis. So, how does these websites create a seamless and dynamic user interfaces? Well, React.js is the secret sauce here. Now, what is React.js? Before we go into how to install it, how to do all sorts of things with React.js, let's first understand what is React.js and how does it work and why does it work in that is the things that we are going to see at first. So, React.js is a JavaScript library which is developed by Facebook for building user interfaces. It's fast, flexible, and makes creating interactive web apps a breeze. In this video, we'll cover the basics you need to get started. Now, how does React.js actually works and how it is related to AngularJS? So, React.js is actually a replacement for AngularJS, we can say. Okay. So most of the websites nowadays uses React.js as we talked. So React.js is less opinionated compared to AngularJS. How does that happens? So AngularJS is basically a framework, whereas React.js is a library, right? So in case of AngularJS, it controls everything from the start of creating a website to till the end of the production phase. But in case of React.js, it gives you freedom to choose multiple libraries if you want. Let's say in case of React.js, since it is a library, it does not contain routing, it does not contain authentication in itself, right? It does not contain, like say, how do you host it, right? How you are going to make it state managements are not there in React.js by default. So you have to use a third-party library, and there is a freedom that you get, like what kind of library that you can use. So because of that freedom that you get with React.js, which is kind of a customization that you can do with React.js, it we say React.js is less opinionated than AngularJS. Then React.js follows, or you can say it does not follows, but it is built on top of like a model view controller. So what does this model view controller means? So this is called MVC pattern, which is actually a type of like structure that we use in in most of the other frameworks. But in React.js, it is mostly like a component-based architecture that we follow in React.js, and which is more or like compared to mod MVC pattern that we see in other frameworks like let's say Django or maybe Flask and all, right? So it uses architecture which is component based architecture. Then in this, what is MVC now? So basically, it in our case for like MVC in React.js, if we say the views that we talk about. So the views can be created using components. Since it is a component-based structure, it follows a component-based structure. The views can be created using components in React.js. Okay. Then what about model and what about controller? What are the how can we create these things? So if we want to create controllers, in that case we can use like let's say event handling, right? Or we can basically so for controller event handling, what does event handling do? So it just creates a kind of a glue in between views and model, right? And what is model now? So model is more likely like how do you manage the state of your website, right? Or application, or how do you manage the logic of your web application? So that is basically a model. That representation of those state and logics are model. So this is how we can say a React.js actually follows a kind of a pattern of MVC. Okay. And then the next thing is it is a minimal server support dictated. So minimal server side support is basically React.js is more into front end side. It does not contains any type of like server side, or it is not having any back end support by itself. If you want a kind of a back end support for it, you have to use like say different, like it does not support server side rendering. So in that case you have to use like let's say Node.js, or else in case apart from this React.js, what are the other things that you can use? So we have Next.js that you can use to create a full-fledged website using your server-side rendering as well. Okay, but in case of React.js is just a client-side library. That is it. It does not inherent the property of server side. Okay, like routing you can say, or state management, or database interactions. So that is not there in React.js by default. For that, if you want to use those things, you have to use a third party library. Okay, and that can be integrated with React.js again. And then we can say React.js not as a library, but it will become as a full-fledged framework, okay, where you can integrate other libraries or packages or modules to make it much more like interactive for the users. Okay, so in that case we can say in that case we can say React.js is a full-fledged library, sorry, framework. Then it focuses on supporting programming in the large and single page application. So React.js is basically it supports a single page application. So we'll talk about how does React.js actually works, but first understand what is this component based architecture that we talked about, right? So it follows a component based architecture. Let's just go into our React.js, the documentation of React.js, which actually have everything that we need as a beginner to start with. So it creates interfaces from components. Okay. So you can see, let's assume like this is my interface that we have created for a website. Okay. So if you see this whole component, if we create this website using like HTML, it will be like this whole thing is will be a single component, right? But when it comes to React.js, what it does in React.js is, let's say this my video, which is a title actually. So this h3 is a title, which actually seems like this h3 is a tag of HTML, but we'll talk about it. What is this actually? And then p tag also seems like a HTML tag, just normal HTML tag, right? Even at a tag seems like normal HTML tag. But these are actually called as a component. Okay, so this whole thing is a single component. Then this like button that you see. So these all are a separate component, which is not at all dependent on each other. Okay, if we talk about like normal HTML, it is the whole website is dependent on each other, right? Like because we have a single document, or let's say if I'm having a web pages like A, B, C, D. So if I do some activity even in D.html, there will be some things which may affect our a.html that we might not see as a user, but in the back end, that is what happens, and that is how actual website works. Okay, so in that case, React.js has advantage over here that it creates a website or web page, I can say actually, which is not at all where all the components are not at all related with any one of the others. Okay, so like let's say this title will not be dependent on this description. Okay, if I want to change the description only will be changed. Okay, so that is how React.js actually works. So it is basically follows a component-based structure, right? Then the main thing over here is if you see whatever we are writing over here, right? It like let's say this section or h2 tag or video tag. So these are actually seems like a normal HTML syntax, right? But it actually follows. There is something called JavaScript XML, that is JSX. It follows a syntax which is actually a JSX, which seems like HTML syntax, but it is not. Okay, so it follows a JSX syntax. Why it follows a JSX syntax? It is very easy to create and maintain. Right? If we talk about maintaining this React application, it is very easy when we talk about when we talk from a perspective of developer. who, let's say, just came or shifted from writing normal HTML codes to React.js. So in that case, they can just go with this React.js, where it is more likely they are going to write and see the codes which they have used to write in HTML, right? So they are going to write the same tags like H2 tag, or let's say A tag, B tag, heading tags, right? So the same tags can be used, but it will all be called as a component in React.js. Okay. So that is what React.js actually is about. Now, let's see the main thing. How does React.js actually works? Okay. So for that, I have to just go to one more documentation that is called White.js. Okay. I'm not taking any reference of White.js as of now. There is just one animation that I want to show you here. So let's assume like I am having a website. How does React.js work? So instead of this icon, you just think of it like this is a React.js application. Okay, like this is your React.js library. So assume like this side you're writing like the code in all JavaScript, CSS, okay, and there is one HTML file that will be there in HTML in React.js. There will not be multiple HTML file. There will be multiple JavaScript file can be there, but there will be only one HTML file that we talk about when we create a website. But now understand like there is one JS file, there is one CSS file, and there is one maybe like let's just assume JSON files that you want to display over here. So these are only three files that you have given to a React application. But if we talk about a website, right, a website can be only displayed when it has a HTML page, right? Without HTML, a website cannot be displayed. Like if you see this website only, it has an interface. That since there is an interface, that means there is a HTML, right? But how does it creates HTML pages? So React.js takes JavaScript, CSS, and JSON files. Let's say whatever the files that you're giving to React.js. So it takes all the files into one single block, and then it transpiles those codes into only three files: HTML, CSS, and JS. You can see whatever I am giving this side, it is all getting converted back into HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. There is no other things that is React.js is going to do. Okay. So when React.js builds a website, whatever, let's say, even if you're writing like thousands of JS files, right? Yet it will just convert those files into HTML, CSS, and JS files. So there will be only three files, and that is what we need actually to build a whole website, right? So that is actually the working of React.js. That is the behind scene of React.js. So let's say you are having multiple components over here. So these multiple components that you see, it just goes to Babel. Babel is a transpile language which actually transpiles the code that you have into your browser. Like you can think of it like a compiler that you see, right? So instead of compiler, we have transpilers. Okay. Then it converts those every component into this webpack. It transfers into webpack. And then, so what is Webpack? So it bundles all the modules and the resources like CSS, images, HTML, everything. And then it converts those every code into only three files: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then it gives you the output on the web page, right? So that is how React.js works in the backend. Okay. There is more things to it. Let's just see here. There is some more things over here. Like in React.js, there is a thing called virtual DOM, and that is the only feature I can say because of which React.js actually came, and why does Facebook actually worked on React.js. Okay, so let's just understand what is virtual DOM here. So I'll just go to virtual DOM visualizer. Okay, let's just write visualizer, and let's just see what does actually means. So if I go here, React.js works on virtual DOM. Okay, what is DOM first of all? So a DOM is basically, let's say, if I am having this architecture over here, like this whole websites that I see. So if I have this architecture, you can see over here that whenever you have a website, it has a HTML, right, in it. So HTML is a just a tag, let's say, right? Inside HTML, we have two things. One is head, second one is body, right? So these are the only tags that we have. So you can think of it like this is a kind of a tree structure, right? So DOM is basically a tree structure for your website or for the code that you have written for your website, right? So these are the lines of code that we have. Okay, let me just undo it. So these are the lines of code that we have, and this side you can see this is how DOM actually, a real DOM actually works. So what it does is it has kind of a tree structure. So if I try to update a single document, let's say if I try to update this particular h2 tag over here, okay, what will happen? Just a second, sorry. So what will happen in that case if I just, let's say if I delete this thing, what will happen? So operation delete will be will take a lot more time in case of tree structure, right? If we have, let's say, if assume like this is a tree structure, and if we try to delete this particular h2 tag here, right, it will take a more time. So basically it is kind of a time complexity comes into picture. Okay, so to just delete this, it is going to re-render each and every node. Okay, like in normal HTML that we talk about. So when we write or when we delete or update or do any sorts of thing with this h2, it will just re-render each and every nodes that you see over here. Okay, that is one flaw with normal HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, but why does React.js came and so React.js just came with one simple logic that let's just create a virtual DOM for this real DOM. Okay, what is virtual DOM now? So this particular DOM that you see, it is something called real DOM in case of React.js. Now it creates a replica of the same virtual DOM, okay, sorry, real DOM, and creates a virtual DOM. What does virtual DOM do here now? So now think of this whole DOM is a virtual DOM now, okay, and just take a replica of the same on the other side. So when we do that, what happens is, let's say if I want to update this particular h2 tag here, right? What it will do is it will basically update this, or let's say delete it in the virtual DOM. Okay, it will not perform any task in the real DOM. So it will update or delete in the virtual DOM. So virtual DOM is actually so deleting or doing any sorts of operation in virtual DOM is much more easier because that is the part of React.js that it handles all sorts of things. If you want to go into deep into it, let me know in the comment. I'll maybe go into depth of this. But as of now, let's just see. So this is virtual DOM where it works on. So it will first update into virtual DOM, and then what it will do is it will just compare it with the real DOM. Okay, let's say there is, let's say there is two DOMs which is there. So it will just compare, and actually let me just show you some of the images so that you can understand. So let's see here. So assume like here we have one DOM. Okay. So this is your virtual DOM and this is real DOM. So till let's say I want to update this particular DOM, okay, node actually. So if I am updating this node, what will happen in real DOM? So when we update this node in real DOM, every node will get affected, as I told you before. But in virtual DOM, when we talk about React.js, what is going to happen in that case? So it is just going to take this DOM node and it is going to update this node in virtual DOM. And then whatever the child node for it, it will get updated. And then it will try to compare it with the real DOM. So you can say like either you can say browser DOM or real DOM. So it will try to compare it with this DOM. Okay. And then after comparing the with the real DOM, it will re-render only the changed DOM, a changed node. Okay. So these are the two nodes which is getting affected using, like say, any of the operations, like either using let's say create or update or delete. So these are the only nodes will get affected in the real DOM. That is the working behind React.js. Okay, that is how React.js actually works in the backend. Okay. That is it for today itself. And if we are going into more, so in the next video, maybe we'll go into more about React.js, how to install it, how to make it, how to make a website using React.js and all. Okay, so for today, we are just done here. Thank you. This is it for today. We'll see you in the next video, maybe. And please don't hesitate to leave some constructive performance feedback, as this was my first video on YouTube. And make some comments and let me know if there is any change that you want to have